There is a huge problem in the Star Wars fandom that needs to be addressed before this problem leads to the extinction of the greatest franchise of all time, Star Wars. Now, this problem that everyone seems to think is something new has been around for decades, and it's just grown larger and larger, and with the latest news in the Star Wars universe, this problem has never been more clear. And yes, that problem is the Star Wars fandom itself.
Wait. Whoa.
More specifically, the divide in the Star Wars fandom that just continues to grow with each passing second. Now, before you click away thinking this video is just something about the Acolyte and how it should be renewed, it's not. This video is about this problem that needs to be fixed, because the divide in the Star Wars fandom is way bigger and way worse than you could possibly imagine. And whether you like the Acolyte show or not, this divide in the Star Wars fandom could lead to possibly seeing no new future Star Wars projects ever. Now first, let me explain how this is not just an Acolyte issue. The divide in the Star Wars fandom has been around for decades, and it's not just one singular project that got us to this point. Because a long time ago, in a Milky Way galaxy far, really close, George Lucas created Star Wars that hit theaters in 1977. In what instantly became one of the greatest science fiction films of all time, it got a sequel. And another sequel, and that gave us the original trilogy. And all was well in the Star Wars fandom. Or was it? Space teddy bears saved the galaxy, and the divide in the fandom began. Some fans, myself included, loving the Ewoks and how they helped the rebellion save the galaxy. And some fans, quite frankly, finding it stupid. And for the next 16 years, from 1983 to 1999, there was no canon Star Wars content. However, in 1999, The Phantom Menace was released. And leading up to that release, fans could not be more excited to see more from their favorite franchise of all time. But to many people's surprise, it was not what they remembered from 20 years ago when they were kids, and it wasn't what they wanted at all. And the divide grew drastically throughout the prequel trilogy. From the release of Attack of the Clones to Revenge of the Sith, some fans absolutely despising these movies. Which may sound crazy today because the prequel trilogy is pretty much beloved by most Star Wars fans, but at the time, the divide just kept on growing. Oh yeah, and now something even more crazy has entered the equation: the internet. Chat rooms about Star Wars have opened up, and the fighting online began. And not only was this divide growing larger in 1999 because the release of The Phantom Menace, but a portion of the fandom decided to use violence online to come after actors. Jake Lloyd being bullied an insane amount online for his portrayal of a young Anakin Skywalker, along with Ahmed Best, who voiced the fully CGI character of Jar Jar Binks. This was the beginning of online bullying of actors and actresses in the Star Wars fandom. And although you might be sitting here watching this video going, "Mike, that's not me, I'm not bullying Star Wars actors," these people still claim to be a portion of this Star Wars fandom. So this is a huge portion of the problem that we are talking about today. And Ahmed Best and Jake Lloyd are only the beginning of this problem, as Hayden Christensen, as the prequel trilogy continued with Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, got bullied online like crazy for his performance as Anakin Skywalker as well. And it only got worse in 2008. Star Wars came back to the theaters after a 3-year hiatus, and for the first time in animation form. This, of course, was the Clone Wars movie. And wow, this was received very well by Star Wars fans and critics alike. And you guessed it, the divide in the Star Wars fandom continued to grow. And with 6 seasons of a Clone Wars animated series, the next few years seemed good-ish. With each passing season of the Clone Wars getting progressively better, Star Wars fans seem to be pretty satisfied. Still complaining about the prequel trilogy and the Clone Wars movie, but things seem to be settling down and things were looking up.
But wait!
There's a storm coming, Ari.
And that storm in the Star Wars fandom began in the year 2012, when George Lucas decided to sell Lucasfilm and Star Wars along with it to Disney.
This is where the fun begins.
Disney's acquisition of the powerhouse of a franchise, Star Wars, started with the sequel trilogy. In 2017, the movie that causes still the most controversy in the Star Wars fandom when brought up today, The Last Jedi, was released. And yes, the divide in the Star Wars fandom continued to grow. And with The Last Jedi, the bullying of actors came back as well. Death threats being sent to Kelly Marie Tran and John Boyega. And these people claim to be Star Wars fans?
I don't think so.
Shortly after The Last Jedi was released, the sequel trilogy came to a close with The Rise of Skywalker in 2019, and Star Wars took a hiatus from the movie theaters that still continues to this day. And the only live-action Star Wars content that we've received since then has been in a TV series form on Disney+. Starting with The Mandalorian, which seems to be the most beloved by Star Wars fans, it was still met with a divide in the Star Wars fandom, saying that Season 2 relied too much on cameos and not enough on the character of Din Djarin, fans absolutely despising the name of Grogu when it was first announced in that second season. And then the return of Boba Fett led to his own series titled The Book of Boba Fett, and the divide continued to grow drastically as this series was called Beta Fett, or Boba Fett, or just Mando Season 2.5. This show was followed by the release of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which seemed like an easy win, and most fans really wanted to see this series as it involved Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader / Anakin Skywalker. And with Kenobi came back the bullying of the actors, not Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, but Moses Ingram for her character of Reva and Vivian Blair for her young Leia, as if they didn't learn from bullying Jake Lloyd 20 years before. The next series was Andor, or Andor as many Star Wars fans called it. And although I think Andor is probably one of the best written Star Wars shows, or shows period, a portion of the Star Wars fandom still found something to complain about. Again, calling it Andor, or complaining about bricks and screws in Star Wars. The next live-action series was Ahsoka, and it was kind of met like The Mandalorian. Not many complaints, but Star Wars fans needed to find something to complain about. For example, Sabine being able to use the Force after over 15 years of training. Or again, just relying on cameos like they did in The Mandalorian, with Anakin Skywalker coming back in Ahsoka. And yes, the divide in the Star Wars fandom continued to grow. And that brings us to the latest project, and probably the reason that you're all here today, and that is The Acolyte, the most divisive Star Wars project since The Last Jedi. Some argue even more divisive than The Last Jedi. This show getting review bombed to a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes audience score before it was even released. And after the cancellation of this series last week, confirming that there will not be a second season, the divide in the Star Wars fandom continued to grow. Some fans celebrating as if they won something, and some fans feeling like they lost something because they wanted to see more of these characters in a second season. So all of this to say, this is nothing new. And if you're going to act like none of this exists, from actors being bullied online to the Star Wars fandom being completely divided, then you're just ignoring the problem, and it's only going to get worse. Because it exists, even though some of it is really horrible, and we are in the same Star Wars fandom as some of these awful people, it exists, and covering it up or denying it is just making it worse. The divide in the Star Wars fandom has been around since pretty much day one, and it has just grown bigger and bigger with every Star Wars project that is released. So whether you're on one side or the other, it doesn't matter. This divide in the Star Wars fandom still exists and still is a massive problem. So whether you call yourself a Star Wars fan and you're bullying Star Wars actors online, or you call yourself a Star Wars fan and you're bullying other people for not liking Star Wars projects, this is not a one-way street. It goes both ways. And now this two-way street has come to an intersection. The cancellation of this Acolyte show is far bigger than anyone really understands. This means that the Star Wars fandom, or at least a portion of it, has successfully canceled a Star Wars show. So it doesn't matter if you like this series or not, it has been canceled. And an all-out civil war has started in the Star Wars fandom because of it. And like I just explained, the divide in the Star Wars fandom has been around for decades, but not like this. Both sides of this civil war claiming to be Star Wars fans, while also both sides claiming that the other side is not a true Star Wars fan, if they like or dislike this particular series. Yeah, that's right. It goes both ways. So now you might be saying,
Mike, you're right. This divide in the Star Wars fandom has been here for a while, but it's just going to continue to be there, and we're still going to get new Star Wars content, right?
wrong. The Acolyte being canceled is huge, as the first season clearly ended with more story to be told. Learning the backstory about Vanestra Rho and Chimere, getting to see Chimere train Osha in the ways of the dark side of the Force, and of course, Darth Plagueis in live action for the first time, and the possibility of seeing more of that. But whether you like it or not, the Acolyte has been canceled, meaning one side of the Star Wars fandom has won and one side has lost. So where does it end? From the successful review bomb of 2024 that led the Acolyte to a 13% on audience score on Rotten Tomatoes before the first episode even premiered, to the cancellation of the second season of this series. And that proves to the Star Wars fans that got this show canceled in the first place that this is a successful formula. So what stops them from doing this again? With the next live-action Star Wars project being Skeleton Crew releasing on December 3rd, will that series open its premiere with a 13% as an audience score on Rotten Tomatoes? Will the Star Wars fandom divide even more because of this upcoming series, with no hope ever of there being a second season? And is this problem in the Star Wars fandom so bad that by the time of 2025 rolling around, when Andor Season 2 is set to release, will the Andor people and the Bricks and Screws fans come back and lead Andor Season 2 down a very dark path? Will that series come into the opening premiere with less than a 13% on a Rotten Tomatoes audience score? Where does it end? Well, I'll tell you where it ends. It ends with no more Star Wars projects ever being made. Because the Star Wars fandom has become so hostile, so divided, that there is no way to come up with any new Star Wars project that will be well received and well viewed by fans on Disney Plus or in theaters. So what's the solution to this problem? Well, I'm sure if you made it this far in this video, you're yelling one of two things at the screen. One, just keep making Star Wars projects the way you're doing it and just stop listening to the fans that are hating all over it. Or two, stop making shitty Star Wars content. And if you're yelling one of those two things, you clearly haven't gotten the message. The problem is the Star Wars fans. The Star Wars fans fighting against each other and Star Wars actors and the studios, fighting to get the Acolyte back, fighting to cancel the Acolyte. It goes both ways, and it's a problem that's not going to stop. So if you're sitting here saying that anything that Star Wars creates isn't good and isn't Star Wars, I don't know what you're watching. Because chances are you agree with me when I say one of these things is good. Andor, The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, The Bad Batch, Clone Wars Season 7, Rebels, Rogue freaking One. So what is the solution to this problem? The divide in the Star Wars fandom that isn't going to stop. Does the Skeleton Crew even stand a chance with this current state of the Star Wars fandom? And will Andor Season 2 just be Ambor Season 2, more bricks and screws? Tell me what you think in the comment section below, because honestly, I don't know the solution. This has been a constant issue in the Star Wars fandom long before I was even involved in the Star Wars fandom, long before I was even on this planet. Tell me what you think in the comment section below, because Star Wars is coming back to the big screen in the movie theater form in The Mandalorian and Grogu. And Pedro Pascal might just be showing his face yet again as Din Djarin. And this could lead to the death of one of the most iconic Star Wars characters, The Mandalorian. But I explain why I think that's the case in this video right here.